There is a wound that does not bleed on the skin. It opens slowly, year after year, inside a child's heart when the person who should have loved them most simply is not there. Padre Pio saw many wounds like that. But one day he saw where that wound finally led a father who had caused it, and what it looked like when that father's soul appeared on the edge of eternity. This is not the story of a violent man or a criminal. It is the story of a man who thought providing money was enough, who believed affection was optional, who told himself he would be there later until there was no later left. The friary at San Giovanni Rotondo was full that morning. People came with their illnesses, their sins, their hidden fears. Among them was a grown woman with tired eyes, clutching a rosary that looked almost too small in her hands. When she knelt in the confessional in front of Padre Pio, her voice trembled as she spoke, not about her own sins at first, but about her father. "He is dying, Father," she whispered, "and I don't know what to feel. He was never truly with us. He gave us a house but no home, food but no love, rules but no embrace. Part of me wants to pray for him. Another part of me is still that little girl waiting at the window for a father who never came." Padre Pio listened in silence, his head slightly bowed. For a moment, he said nothing. Then something changed in his expression. His eyes lifted, not toward the woman in front of him, but toward a point beyond her shoulder, as if he suddenly saw someone else standing there. His features softened into a look of deep sorrow and strange compassion. The woman, sensing the shift, fell silent. After a long pause, Padre Pio spoke quietly. "Your father is closer to judgment than you think," he said, "and heaven is showing him what he refused to see in life." He told her that at that very moment, far from the friary, her father was lying in a hospital bed, drifting in and out of consciousness. Doctors and nurses moved around him. Machines hummed softly. His body was weak, but something inside him was finally awake. "He is seeing you as a child," Padre Pio said. "He is seeing all the nights you waited for him at the door, all the school events where you looked for his face and found an empty space instead. He is feeling the cold he left inside your heart and the emptiness in his own." The woman's breath caught. She asked, "Is he sorry?" Padre Pio's face showed both tenderness and gravity. "He is being given the chance to be sorry," he said. "But sorrow is not automatic. It requires surrender. And your father has spent his whole life refusing to surrender anything. Years earlier, that same father had been a young man with dreams. He married, became a father, and somewhere along the way convinced himself that the best way to love his family was to build a fortress of security around them. He worked late, then later. He climbed higher in his career, earned respect from strangers, and forgot the names of his children's teachers. When his wife tried to tell him that the children were lonely, he became defensive. "I'm doing this for them," he would say. "They'll understand when they're older." But understanding never came. Only distance. His son once asked him to come to a school play. The boy had one line, just one, but he had practiced it over and over in front of the mirror, imagining his father's face in the crowd. The father said yes. Then work called. There was a meeting, an opportunity, something that felt urgent at the time, but that no one remembers now. He did not go. When he came home that night, his son was already in bed, face turned toward the wall. The father told himself it did not matter. Children forget these things. But children do not forget, they just stop asking. His daughter learned early that her father's attention had to be earned, not given. She brought home perfect grades, hoping they would make him look up from his newspaper. Sometimes they did for a moment. He would nod, say something brief, then return to whatever he considered more important. She learned to perform, to achieve, to try to become interesting enough to deserve his time. But the bar kept rising, and his gaze kept drifting away. Eventually, she stopped trying. She built her life around the hole where a father's love should have been, and she learned to call that hole independence. There were warnings along the way, small moments when heaven tried to reach him. Once he had a health scare. His heart raced in the middle of the night, and for a few terrifying minutes, he thought he was dying. In that fear, he saw his children's faces and realized he barely knew them. He survived. The doctor told him to slow down, to spend more time with family, to reassess his priorities. For about a week, he tried. He came home earlier, asked questions at dinner, even played a game with his youngest. But the old patterns were stronger than the new intentions. Within a month, he was back to the same rhythm, the same excuses, the same absence. Another warning came through his wife. One night, after the children were asleep, she sat across from him and said the words she had been holding for years. "They don't know you," she said, "and one day they won't want to." He brushed it off. He accused her of being dramatic, of not appreciating his sacrifices. The conversation ended in silence. She stopped trying to reach him after that. The house became a place where people lived separately under the same roof, polite and distant, like strangers sharing an elevator. A priest once gave a homily about fatherhood. He spoke about how fathers are called to reflect the love of God, to be present, to bless, to guide not just with rules, but with relationship. The man heard every word. For a few minutes, sitting in that pew, something stirred in him. He thought about his own father, who had also been distant, and he realized he was repeating the same pattern. He felt a pull, a gentle invitation to change, but when Mass ended, he shook it off. He told himself he was doing fine, that his situation was different, that his children had everything they needed. The moment passed. The invitation was refused. Padre Pio saw all of this, not because someone told him, but because heaven allowed him to see the thread of a soul's choices. He saw how each small refusal built on the last, how each ignored warning hardened the heart a little more, how a man who thought himself successful was actually starving the people who needed him most. And now, as that man lay dying, Padre Pio saw what was happening in the invisible realm. The Father was not being condemned by an angry judge. He was being confronted by love itself, and love was showing him the truth he had spent his life avoiding. In the hospital room, the man's mind drifted between memory and something deeper than memory. He saw his daughter at 7 years old, standing by the door in her Sunday dress, waiting for him to take her to the park like he had promised. He never came. He had forgotten. He saw his son at 12 trying to show him something he had built, and he saw himself waving the boy away because he was watching television. He saw his wife's face across the table, the hope in her eyes fading year after year as he chose everything else over her. He saw birthday candles blown out in front of an empty chair. He saw report cards signed by his wife because he was too busy. He saw moments when his children needed comfort and found only his back as he walked out the door. And in all of this, he began to feel something he had not allowed himself to feel before: the weight of what he had done. Not what he had given them, but what he had withheld. Not the house or the money, but the presence, the attention, the simple daily love that shapes a child's heart. He had told himself for so long that he was a good father because he provided. Now, for the first time, he was seeing fatherhood through the eyes of the children he had failed. Padre Pio, still in the confessional with the daughter, spoke gently but firmly. "Your father is being given a grace right now," he said. "He is being allowed to see what love required of him and what he gave instead. This is not cruelty, this is mercy, because only by seeing the truth can he repent of it." The woman's tears fell silently. She asked, "What should I do, Father?" Padre Pio answered, "Pray for him, not because he deserves it, but because grace can still reach him if he is willing to receive it. Your prayers can open a door he has kept, locked his whole life." Back in the hospital, the father's breathing slowed. The machines beeped steadily. His family stood around him, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. His daughter, the one now kneeling before Padre Pio, had not yet arrived. His son stood near the foot of the bed, arms crossed, face unreadable. His wife held his hand, not out of warmth, but out of duty. In his fading consciousness, the father felt their presence, and for the first time he also felt their distance. He had built that distance, every brick of it. A priest had been called, but the father waved him away earlier when he was still conscious enough to refuse. Now, as his strength faded, the priest returned and stood quietly at his bedside. He leaned close and whispered, "It is not too late. God is still here. He is waiting for you to say yes." The father's eyes flickered. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the pride and the fear and the decades of self-justification, something cracked. He saw his children again, not as disappointments or strangers, but as the gifts he had been given and wasted. He saw his wife, not as the woman who nagged him, but as the woman who had tried to save him from himself. And in that moment, he had a choice. He could cling to his version of the story, the one where he was the hero who sacrificed everything, or he could surrender to the truth. He could ask for mercy. He could admit that he had been wrong, that he had failed the people who needed him most, that he had mistaken success for love and absence for provision. The choice was his, and it was free. Heaven would not force him. Love never does. Padre Pio, miles away, closed his eyes and prayed. He prayed for the man he had never met, but whose soul he saw so clearly. He prayed for the daughter weeping in front of him. He prayed that the walls built over a lifetime might crack just enough to let light in. And as he prayed, he saw, in that mysterious way he sometimes saw, a flicker of movement in the father's soul. Not certainty, but possibility. Not transformation, but the beginning of it. The father's lips moved. The priest leaned closer. The words were barely audible, broken, more breath than sound. "I'm sorry." Then, quieter still, "Help me." It was not eloquent. It was not a full confession, but it was real. And in the economy of grace, even the smallest surrender can become a doorway. The priest whispered the words of absolution, anointed him, and within minutes the father's breathing stopped. He passed from time into eternity, carrying with him both the weight of his failures and the mercy he had finally, barely, accepted. Padre Pio opened his eyes. The daughter, still kneeling, looked at him with desperate hope. "Did he—" She could not finish the question. Padre Pio's face was gentle. "He said yes," Padre Pio answered. At the very end, when there was almost nothing left of him but truth, he said yes. It was not the yes he should have given his whole life, but it was enough for God to meet him. She wept, this time not only with grief, but with relief. Her father had not been lost entirely. The prayers she had whispered, even through her anger and hurt, had reached him. Grace had done what she could not. But Padre Pio did not leave it there. He knew that salvation at the last breath is mercy, but it is also tragedy. "Your father is saved," he said, "but do not think his life was without consequences. The love he withheld, the wounds he left, the years he wasted, these things are real. Purgatory will purify him, but the fire he will feel is the fire of seeing fully what he could have been and was not. And you, his children, carry scars that will take time to heal. Salvation is not the same as restoration. He will spend a long time learning what love truly is." She nodded, understanding. Padre Pio continued, "Tell your brother, tell your mother. Forgive him, not because it erases what happened, but because holding on to the pain will only deepen the wound. And if you have children or ever will, remember this: presence is not optional. Your father thought he was building a legacy with his work. But legacy is not measured in money or status. It is measured in the hearts of the people you were given to love." The daughter left the confessional lighter than she had entered, carrying both sorrow and hope. Padre Pio remained in the dim wooden booth, his own heart heavy. He had seen this pattern so many times. Fathers who believed providing was loving, mothers who gave everything except themselves, parents who built kingdoms for their children but never entered the small kingdom of their hearts. And always, the children paid the price. He thought of all the men who came to him for confession, successful and respected, who had no idea that their children barely knew them. He thought of the fathers who justified their absence with noble words about sacrifice and responsibility, who could not see that their children would trade every comfort for 1 hour of undivided attention. He thought of how many deathbeds he had witnessed, where the dying finally understood what mattered, but only when it was too late to go back and live differently. Padre Pio believed deeply that God is just, but he also believed that God's justice is inseparable from truth. A father cannot ignore his children and expect no consequence. The sin is not only in what is done, but in what is left undone. Neglect is not neutral. It is a form of abandonment, and it leaves wounds that last for generations. Children who grow up without a father's blessing spend their whole lives searching for it in the wrong places. They look for worth in achievements, in other people's approval, in anything that might fill the hole left by a parent who was physically present but emotionally absent. And yet Padre Pio also believed in the power of even the smallest act of love. He told people that if they had failed, if they had been distant, if they had neglected those they should have cherished, it was not too late to change, not too late to ask forgiveness, not too late to show up, even if showing up felt awkward or uncomfortable, not too late to bless, to listen, to be present in the small moments that build a life. He insisted that children, no matter how old, still long for their father's love. And a father who humbles himself and admits his failures can begin to heal what he once broke. But he also warned that time is shorter than people think. The father in this story had years, decades even, to change. He received warning after warning, a health scare, a wife's tears, a priest's homily, a child's disappointment. Each one was a gift, an invitation, a chance to stop and turn around. But he ignored them all, confident that there would always be more time. And in the end, there was barely enough time for a whispered yes. He was saved, but at what cost? A lifetime of love wasted, a family that would always carry the ache of what could have been. Padre Pio spoke often about the eternal weight of daily choices. He said that heaven does not judge only the dramatic sins, the headlines, the scandals. It judges the 10,000 small moments that shape a soul and the souls around it. The decision to stay late at work instead of going to a recital. The choice to scroll through a phone instead of asking a child about their day. The habit of silence instead of blessing. These things seem small, but small things, repeated over years, become the structure of a life. And that structure either builds a home or a tomb. In the case of this father, the structure had been a tomb. His children grew up inside it, starved for light. They survived, but survival is not the same as flourishing. And now, even though their father had been saved, they would spend years, maybe a lifetime, learning to forgive him, to let go of the anger and the longing, to accept that they will never get back what was taken from them. Padre Pio saw all of this. He saw the cost of one man's neglect rippling outward, touching his children, his children's children, shaping how they would love and trust and parent. And that is why he wept. Not only for the father, but for all of them. For the daughter who learned to expect nothing and call it strength. For the son who hardened his heart because it hurt too much to keep it open. For the wife who spent her marriage alone. For the grandchildren who would grow up hearing stories about a grandfather they never knew, wondering why their own parents found it so hard to show affection. One man's choice to withhold love had consequences that would echo across generations. But Padre Pio also believed that healing is possible. He believed that even the deepest wounds, when brought to God, can be transformed. He believed that the daughter's prayers, painful as they were, had opened a door not only for her father, but for herself. By choosing to forgive, by choosing to pray even when it hurt, she was breaking the cycle. She was refusing to let her father's failure define her forever. And that, Padre Pio said, is its own kind of miracle. The story of this father is not unique. Padre Pio saw it again and again. Fathers who believed their job was to provide and protect, but who forgot that their greatest job was to love. Fathers who worked themselves to exhaustion for their families, but who never gave their families themselves. Fathers who thought their children would understand later, only to find that later, their children no longer cared. And in every case, the tragedy was the same. So much love wasted, so many moments lost, so many hearts left cold. Padre Pio's message to fathers and to all parents was simple and urgent. Do not wait. Do not assume you have time. Do not convince yourself that providing material things is the same as providing presents. Your children do not need a perfect father. They need a present one. They need your attention, your blessing, your time, your affection. They need to know that they matter more to you than your work, your hobbies, your reputation, your comfort. They need to see your face light up when they enter the room. They need to hear you say you are proud of them. They need to feel safe in your love. And if you have failed, if you have been absent, if you have neglected the people God gave you to love, do not despair, but do not delay either. Go to them. Ask forgiveness. Begin again. It will be hard. It will be humbling, but it is the only way forward, because one day you will stand where that Father stood, on the edge of eternity, and you will see your life as it truly was. And in that moment, the only thing that will matter is love. Not the love you intended to give someday, but the love you actually gave in the small daily moments that make up a life. Padre Pio saw the truth about souls who neglect their children. He saw the wound it creates, the weight it carries, the sorrow it leaves behind. But he also saw the mercy that waits, even at the very end, for anyone willing to say yes. The father in this story was saved, but barely. He crossed the threshold of eternity, carrying both grace and regret. And his children, left behind, carry the scars of his absence. That is the truth Padre Pio saw. That is the warning he gave. That is the call he still offers to anyone willing to listen. Do not wait. Do not waste the love you have been given the chance to give, because in the end, love is all that remains, and neglect, no matter how justified it seemed at the time, is a wound that eternity remembers.